Chapter 139, Assassination. There really are assassins. Zhang Xuning had just returned to her car, and she was slashed outside, which really surprised her. It's just that she has seen such a ruthless scene as Shangqing Guanxiewei's encirclement and suppression of the heavenly sect before, and now that this group of assassins is coming, she is not very afraid. What's more, those assassins all went to the front. Xiao Dingfei. Who would have thought that there would be someone in the woods next to it? The group was a little overwhelmed. Fortunately, the sword book was guarding outside the nearby car, and found the clue in time, and stopped before Xiao Dingfei's car was driving. The long sword was unsheathed, and it was extremely powerful when it was wielded. It was not just as simple as Xiao Xian casually saying martial arts are superficial, and you know some swords. When the long is long, there is a chaotic sound. There were screams from time to time. In a short time the dirt outside the woods was covered with blood, and people were falling. The kung fu of these assassins is actually very good, and the attack is extremely ruthless, and it is completely deadly. As soon as he found that Jianshu was guarding Xiao Dingfei's car without leaving an inch, 3 or 5 people came up and raised their swords at him, and they actually surrounded him, making it impossible for him to get out. 2 others were copied from the flanks. The black scarf covered his face, revealing only a pair of eyes, and the cold light flickered, which made people frightened at first sight. The 2 of them raised their knives and stabbed them into the carriage. Shhhh. The curtain of the car was suddenly cut open with a huge opening. Xiao Dingfei was trapped in the car, although it was a straw bag, but he also carried a sword on his body. As early as when he learned that there was an assassin, he pulled out and held it in his hand, and at this moment the assassin's knife came in, and he immediately came to block it with a horizontal sword. Immediately after that, I heard 2 poof sounds. 2 eagle arrows struck almost simultaneously, piercing through the eyebrows of the 2 assassins with incredible accuracy, piercing both skulls. Xiao Dingfei looked out. In the shadow of an old tree on the edge of the woods, there was a person standing steadily. It was the blue-clothed young mandaekan who was not often seen by Xie side, holding a bow and arrows, but he was not slow, 1 arrow and 1 person. In a few moments there was a ground lying down. It was only at this time that Xie lifted the curtain of the car, got out of the car, stood on the wheel, raised his eyes to sweep away the tragic battle situation, and gave a faint order, "Stay alive." Daekan pursed his lips secretly. Although I was a little dissatisfied, the last carved arrow on the bowstring was still slightly moved downward. Whoosh, a cracking sound. The arrow turned into a flash of lightning and rushed through the shoulder of the last assassin, and the force was so fierce that it nailed this person to the thick wooden plank on the side of Xiao Dingfei's carriage. Xiao Dingfei was still in the car, but when he saw an arrow penetrating from the other end of the wooden board, his scalp exploded in fright. Deng Shi couldn't help but scold, "Your grandma. Whose life is this?" These assassins came quickly and died quickly. The entourage realized that they had broken out in a cold sweat at this moment, and they didn't dare to think about it at all. If they found out that the clues were a little more at night, with the strength of these assassins, they didn't know how many people would die. When he looked at the sword book and the sword and chain beside Xie, he was a little in awe. Zhang Xuning watched from afar and didn't dare to get out of the car. Xiao Yuan's car was driving in front, and at this moment, he got out of the car with a frightened look, and glanced around, but his face immediately darkened, full of dark clouds. Okay, there are really assassins. Xie didn't get out of the car, but only called the sword book. The blood on the sword book didn't have time to wipe it, and when he heard Xie's voice, he already understood, and walked straight to the assassin who was nailed to the carriage, and ripped off the black scarf covering the other party's face. He looks like he is in his 30s, with a scar on his left cheek. A face had already twisted from the pain that ran through the shoulder. Then at the moment when the masked black scarf was torn off, A ruthless color flashed in the eyes of this person, and the cheekbones on both sides protruded, as if he was going to bite something hard. He reacted really fast, but the young man's hand in front of him was 3 points faster than him. Didn't wait for him to bite the truth, and the afterimage in front of him flickered suddenly. The assassin only felt a pain in his jaw, and then he lost consciousness. It was the sword book that directly removed his jawbone between the lightning and fire. Xiao Dingfei saw it next to him, and felt that his jaw was cold. The assassin's eyes showed a hint of despair. Jianshu was familiar with the road, and without any effort, he took out the small poison sac from under his teeth, turned back to Xiaoyu and said, "Sir, dead man." Xiao Fang put the master of the Qin Hall seal back into the seal bag, not surprised at all, and said with a smile, "It seems that I can't ask anything." Xiao Yuan just walked over, a little frightened. Xiao Wei waved his hand lightly, "Kill it." The assassin really didn't expect that. A look of surprise surged into his face, and the sword book had directly slashed his neck with the sword, and the blood flowed all over the ground, and then he cleanly drew his sword and threw it on the ground next to him along with the unsightly corpse. Everyone couldn't help but shudder. Zhang Sha saw it in front of him, but he felt that it was unreasonable, and his eyebrows twisted imperceptibly. Xiao Wei was ordinary, looking back at Xiao Yuan to the side, as if he had just remembered, and looked a little sorry. "Look at me, I forgot. This assassin seems to be coming towards Dingfei Gongzi, which is really a great crime. Xia Mao didn't ask the grandfather of the country, so he ordered someone to kill him. Grandpa Guo is not to blame, is he?" God knows how scared Xiao Yuan was when he saw the dead man commit suicide. But then he saw people die in front of him. He was shocked and frightened, but he breathed a sigh of relief, and until this moment he was still in a trance, and only said, "It's not to blame. It's just a pity, even if he is a dead soldier of the heavenly sect, he may not be able to confide in him if he is brought back to be tortured and interrogated." The dead soldier of the heavenly sect? Xiao Dingfei glanced at the mess, and sneered in his heart, a little cold for a while, and a little pity. He only raised his head again and looked at Xiao Wei. The sun rises at noon, and it is almost dusk at this time, and it is the waning sun. The afterglow of the remnant sun is red. There was fog in the mountains and forests. The young master stood tall and long, originally dressed in a snow-white robe, covered by the glow of the sunset, as if soaked in blood, and diluted by the years of time, only a thin layer of red flowed. Xiao Wei seemed to be relieved, and smiled faintly. "Grandpa Guo doesn't blame, it's fine. If the Prince of Dingfei is the son of Dingfei in the past years of the Kuogong mansion, something goes wrong, but no one can afford it. After all, I have heard that the Son of the World, who sacrificed his life as the Savior, is a benefactor that the Holy One always cherishes." Xiao Yuan's face changed slightly. He raised his eyes to look at Xiao Wei. But Xiao Wei stood with his back to the west, and the slanting light was plated on him, so that people couldn't see his face clearly, so he only bowed his hand slightly to Xiao Yuan, and then returned to the car. Zhang Xuning watched from a distance, slowly lowered the curtain, sighed thoughtfully, and sighed, "I'm going back to the capital."